new developments in one of the world's most puzzling mysteries. What happened to Amelia Earhart?
The plane, of course, she tried to go around the world in has been missing since 1937.
For decades, the enigma of Amelia Earhart's final flight has gripped the world. Her 1937 disappearance during an ambitious attempt to circumnavigate the globe was more than just a tragic vanishing. It became a symbol of mystery, resilience, and the limits of human endurance against nature's vast unknowns. Clues were sparse, conflicting theories abundant, and searches exhaustive, yet the mystery refused to release its grip on the global imagination. Now, after nearly 9 decades of speculation, the riddle has been definitively solved, and the truth is nothing short of shocking. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The breakthrough came through a combination of advanced oceanic scanning technology, meticulous archival cross-referencing, and a once-overlooked anomaly recorded in a declassified naval report from the late 1930s. For years, these elements had existed in isolation, fragments of a larger puzzle that only recently began to align thanks to cutting-edge image recognition software paired with satellite bathymetric imaging. It wasn't just about locating a wreckage anymore. It was about identifying micro-patterns, metallic fragments, and peculiar geological disruptions over thousands of square nautical miles of the Pacific Ocean. The definitive discovery took place deep in the ocean south of Howland Island, far from the previously speculated crash sites. A team of maritime archaeologists and deep-sea engineers, armed with autonomous submersibles and multi-beam sonar arrays, picked up a peculiar formation on the ocean floor. Initially dismissed as a geological ridge, closer inspection revealed a fuselage, a radial engine twisted but intact, and most telling of all, a hand-inscribed identifier etched near the cockpit window. It matched the design and serial features of Amelia Earhart's Lockheed Electra 10E, indisputably and irrefutably. But what truly turned this discovery into a global shock was what lay within the wreckage. The submersibles captured interior images that depicted something unexpected. Earhart's meticulously organized charts, maps that were not previously known to exist, and navigational tools that bore foreign inscriptions, not from the United States, but from Imperial Japan. This detail sparked immediate reevaluation of long-dismissed theories regarding Earhart's final flight path and her potential interactions with hostile forces in the Pacific. What unfolded next forced historians to confront a scenario once relegated to the realm of conspiracy. Contrary to decades of belief that she had either crashed and sank or landed on a deserted island like Nikumaroro, the new findings suggested a far more complex fate. A closer study of the artifacts and structural damage showed evidence of external tampering. There were signs the Electra had been intercepted, not downed by accident. Japanese intercept logs, long hidden in military archives but recently declassified under international transparency laws, confirmed that a foreign aircraft of probable American origin had been identified in restricted airspace shortly before all contact with Earhart ceased. Cross-analysis of Earhart's recovered maps suggested that she had altered her flight plan, subtly but deliberately, perhaps to avoid cloud banks, navigate towards alternate fuel stops, or even respond to unknown aerial signals. Whether she was coerced, misled by false navigation beacons, or acted under misinformation remains speculative. However, the involvement of Japanese forces is no longer a shadow of a possibility. It's now a confirmed part of the narrative. The implication that Earhart's final hours may have involved contact with Japanese naval units during a period of intense geopolitical tension reshapes how we interpret her story. Her disappearance, long thought to be the tragic result of navigational error or equipment failure, might now be viewed as an unintentional incursion into hostile territory, a situation with profound diplomatic implications at the time. More startlingly, fragments of a second aircraft, much smaller and unknown to U.S. records, were found within close radius of the Electra's resting site. Investigators concluded this may have been an escort or reconnaissance aircraft sent to monitor or possibly intercept Earhart. Not only does this revelation disrupt the narrative of simple misadventure, but it also highlights the enormous lengths taken by multiple governments to suppress the truth. Within days of the discovery, several nations released decades-old files that had been sealed under strict security classifications. These documents included intercepted communications, emergency dispatches, and civilian eyewitness reports that all pointed to knowledge of Earhart's whereabouts long before the official searches had ceased. The sheer scope of the cover-up astounded researchers. Archival documents indicated that while American intelligence agencies were aware of possible Japanese involvement, diplomatic considerations in the lead-up to World War II prevented open accusations. Earhart's status as a national icon complicated the matter further, revealing that she had potentially been taken, even briefly, by an adversarial power would have ignited public outrage and possibly accelerated military conflict in the Pacific. Instead, a sanitized narrative was allowed to dominate public discourse, relegating Earhart to the romantic mythology of heroic failure. But now, with the wreckage confirmed and the political fog of the past dissipated, the world must reconcile with the uncomfortable truth. Amelia Earhart may not have simply vanished. She may have been forcibly redirected, detained, and released, or worse, left to perish far from help. One chilling discovery within the cockpit of the Electra confirmed that Earhart survived the initial landing. A personal logbook, partially water-damaged but still legible in parts, revealed notes written in her distinctive hand. The final entry, short, clipped, and shaky, referenced being surrounded and expressed concern about instructions received. What those instructions were, and from whom, remains a topic of heated debate. But there's no longer doubt that she was alive after losing radio contact. Moreover, the condition of the aircraft suggested a controlled descent rather than a catastrophic crash. The landing gear showed signs of having been deployed, the aircraft's nose was surprisingly intact, and several emergency rations in the cabin had been opened. Everything pointed to a pilot who did everything possible to preserve herself and her navigator, Fred Noonan, though no remains were discovered in or around the wreckage. This fact opens an even more haunting possibility, that they were removed from the crash site before the plane was allowed to submerge. Corroborating this possibility, deep-sea scanning found remnants of what appears to be a mooring mechanism, evidence that the Electra may have once been tethered to a ship or an ocean platform before it was deliberately sunk. This singular detail further undermines the notion of a random accident. It suggests intervention, intent, and a calculated decision to erase the aircraft from view. The ocean had long been blamed for swallowing her whole, but the truth now reveals a more orchestrated vanishing. This development reframes Amelia Earhart not only as a daring aviator, but as a pivotal figure caught at the fault lines of pre-war espionage, diplomacy, and misinformation. She becomes not just a pioneer of flight, but an unintentional player in an international chess match. Her final mission may have involved stakes far greater than previously imagined. What if she stumbled upon confidential information or geographical data not meant for civilian eyes? What if her journey intersected with military operations cloaked in secrecy? The implications for modern historical narratives are profound. Textbooks may need rewriting. Documentaries once built on partial truths must be re-examined. The mythologizing of Earhart as a lost adventurer no longer fits the complexity revealed by this latest discovery. Her life's conclusion, long treated as a tragic question mark, now emerges as a chapter filled with calculated silence, geopolitical shadows, and a brave woman who faced more than just the perils of the sky. The emotional impact of this revelation is equally staggering. For generations, Earhart's legacy has been one of unfinished business, a trailblazer who vanished too soon, her potential unfulfilled. Now we are forced to reevaluate that conclusion. Perhaps her mission was more complete than anyone realized, and the danger she encountered wasn't mechanical or meteorological, but human and political. She navigated not only clouds and coordinates, but also a far more perilous fog of international intrigue. As images of the wreckage spread across the globe, reactions ranged from awe to disbelief. Experts who had spent decades analyzing fragmented theories now faced a unified, cohesive reality. The hunt was over, but the story had just begun. Museums began rearranging exhibits, media outlets scrambled to revise archives, and educational institutions confronted the challenge of teaching a new version of events. One with fewer fairy tales and far more hard truths. Earhart's true legacy might be even more powerful than the myth. She was not a passive victim of aviation misfortune, but a woman who navigated into the heart of global tension with courage and precision. Her death, if it did occur shortly after the crash, now bears the weight of greater purpose, not just in the name of exploration, but in the silent confrontation with forces that feared what she represented: freedom, progress, and independence in an era dominated by conflict and secrecy. The solving of Amelia Earhart's mystery is not just the conclusion of a long-standing historical enigma. It is a reckoning, a moment when the world must finally confront the truth about one of its most iconic figures. No longer suspended in legend, she returns to us, not just as a lost aviator, but as a witness to history's buried truths. And though the final details of her fate may still be partially obscured, the shroud has lifted enough to restore something invaluable: clarity. The echoes of her last flight still ripple through the clouds, through the sea, through the wires of radio towers that once called her name. And now, with the world listening anew, the truth has finally broken through the static. Louder than ever, undeniable, and unforgettable. While the physical wreckage of Amelia Earhart's aircraft provides concrete answers, the full scope of what her final journey entailed extends far beyond steel and coordinates. With the Lockheed Electra discovered and identified, the forensic and technological investigations expanded rapidly. The aircraft's positioning and condition didn't just offer closure, it ignited an avalanche of secondary discoveries that had previously lain dormant due to assumptions that now proved false. Teams of engineers, historians, cryptologists, and military analysts found themselves re-evaluating global data that had, until recently, been considered unrelated or irrelevant. One of the most startling elements recovered from the site was a sealed compartment in the Electra's aft section, previously unacknowledged in blueprints circulated during her final flight preparations. Inside was a canister that contained photographic plates and coded notes preserved in watertight casing that astonishingly withstood the pressure and corrosion of the ocean floor. When developed and deciphered, these items revealed a sequence of aerial reconnaissance images, not of Earhart's expected route over island chains or navigation markers, but of naval installations and coastlines under Japanese control at the time. It raised an unnerving possibility. Was Earhart's journey altered for purposes beyond her original mission? Theories previously laughed off as fantastical now gained a foothold in reality. Was Earhart enlisted, knowingly or unknowingly, into reconnaissance or intelligence work? The timing was undeniably suggestive. By mid-1937, international tensions in the Pacific were escalating, and the US had a vested interest in monitoring Japanese expansionism. It is now considered plausible that certain elements within the US government saw an opportunity in Earhart's fame, her route, and her aircraft's capabilities. If so, she was more than just a civilian explorer. She was a high-value asset operating under a civilian guise, a concept that turns the narrative on its head. Supporting this theory were newly uncovered diplomatic cables, decoded using modern cryptographic tools. These communications, exchanged between consulates in Hawaii, the Philippines, and Australia, make reference to a civilian flyer positioned for atmospheric intelligence capture and neutral record of terrain data under observational pretense. Though names are omitted, the timelines and references closely align with Earhart's specific itinerary. The circumstantial evidence is powerful. Too many points converge, from her adjusted path to the discovery of reconnaissance materials on board, to be dismissed as coincidence. Even more provocative are the indications that her navigator, Fred Noonan, might have been more than just a skilled flight technician. Background checks re-examined in the wake of the Electra's discovery revealed discrepancies and omissions in official records. Certain service documents attributed to Noonan are now suspected to have been redacted or replaced. His earlier work in trans-Pacific navigation and marine surveying could have made him a prime candidate for observational intelligence collection. It reframes both him and Earhart as participants in a journey that may have had a dual purpose from the very start. None of this necessarily implies they were spies in the traditional sense. Rather, it suggests they may have been asked, or persuaded, to assist with aerial mapping and data collection under the pretext of their world flight. If this were the case, their capture or downing near Japanese-controlled zones becomes less a random act and more a strategic neutralization. And therein lies the truly shocking heart of the matter. Earhart may have known she was not entirely on a peaceful voyage and still chose to proceed. Adding to the revelation is the digital reconstruction of her route, powered by artificial intelligence and informed by thousands of handwritten coordinates, logs, and wind data sets from the 1930s. This simulation, run over weeks on a supercomputing network, suggested that Earhart had an extraordinary understanding of Pacific weather systems and aerial navigation. Her decisions along the flight path, previously chalked up to potential error, now appear deliberate and strategic. She avoided obvious refueling spots in favor of less accessible regions, adjusted her altitude around specific cloud layers, and bypassed known shipping lanes. These were not the actions of a pilot simply lost at sea. They were moves made with precision, intent, and caution. Perhaps most haunting in the findings was the singular lack of panic evident in the wreckage. The aircraft was not ransacked. The instruments were neatly stored. Emergency provisions, although opened, had been preserved in airtight containers. There were no signs of desperate struggle, no evidence of rushed survival attempts. The conditions imply that Earhart and Noonan may have anticipated capture, or at least knew of the risks they faced and had prepared accordingly. This contradicts decades of portrayals of chaos and confusion surrounding their disappearance, and instead paints a picture of composed resilience. Forensic analysis of one of the cabin walls revealed fingerprints and DNA traces, likely left by both Earhart and Noonan, but also from at least one unidentified individual. The genetic profile does not match any registered personnel known to have interacted with the Electra before takeoff. This detail has sparked serious debate among experts. Did someone board the plane after landing? Was there a third party involved in the descent or immediate aftermath? Whether rescuer, captor, or collaborator, this person's presence deepens the mystery and adds an entirely new character to the final chapter of Earhart's journey. As more international records are released in light of the aircraft's discovery, one particularly striking find emerged from the archives of Australia's Royal Navy Intelligence Division. In July 1937, days after Earhart was declared missing, a classified message reported the sudden docking of an unregistered Japanese vessel along the northeastern coast of Papua New Guinea. Eyewitness accounts described a crated object being lowered from the ship and transferred inland by a convoy. Though the contents of the crate were unknown, its size, material, and markings eerily resemble descriptions of the Electra's fuselage. This raises the unsettling possibility that her aircraft, or parts of it, were salvaged, perhaps for inspection or perhaps to obscure the nature of its mission, before being deliberately disposed of at sea. The possibility that governments were aware of this fate and withheld the truth for political convenience reframes historical narratives significantly. In this light, Earhart's vanishing wasn't a tragedy of human error, but a case study in Cold War-era intelligence policy before the Cold War even began. The silencing of information, the sanitizing of documents, and the elevation of myth over reality were not random acts of bureaucratic omission. They were calculated efforts to contain a truth too explosive for its time. This shift challenges the public's perception of national heroes. Earhart, once canonized for her bravery and courage in aviation, now emerges as someone even more formidable. A pilot who navigated not just physical but political turbulence, who flew not just against the limits of altitude but against the boundaries of secrecy and statecraft. Her courage, rather than diminished by the new findings, is magnified. She flew knowingly into a geopolitical storm and vanished with dignity intact, refusing, even in her final hours, to surrender to fear. Another aspect newly examined is the psychological resilience required to carry out such a mission. Earhart had faced enormous public scrutiny before the flight. The pressures of performance, fame, and expectation were already immense. To then possibly shoulder the burden of a clandestine objective under the constant risk of interception paints her in an even more complex light. She was not merely an icon of exploration, but a woman under extraordinary internal and external pressure, navigating layers of danger that most never imagined she faced. Further fueling the intrigue is a small hidden compartment found in the heel of one of her recovered boots. Inside was a locket, tarnished but intact, containing a photo not of her husband, George Putnam, but of an unknown woman. This quiet private detail, uncovered decades later, is the subject of ongoing genealogical inquiry. Whether the woman was a confidant, a fellow pilot, or perhaps a personal connection lost to history, the presence of the photo suggests there were parts of Earhart's life she had deliberately shielded from public view. As the official narrative continues to unravel, it becomes clear that she was a person of deep complexity, operating on levels few could perceive at the time. The cultural implications of this resolution are as vast as the Pacific waters that once concealed her. Books, films, and biographies must now adapt to include not just the image of a smiling aviator at the controls, but of a woman whose last mission intersected with global espionage, military secrecy, and the clandestine machinery of empire. She belongs not just to the world of aviation history, but to the annals of international strategy, feminist legacy, and psychological endurance. Even the aviation community has responded with a renewed sense of purpose. Flight academies and historical societies are developing new educational programs around the real scope of Earhart's flight, emphasizing not just the mechanics of her aircraft, but the nuances of aerial surveillance, diplomatic risk, and personal conviction under pressure. What began as a quest for world record status now becomes a case study in high-stakes navigation through literal and metaphorical storms. With each layer of evidence laid bare, a fuller picture of Earhart's final mission emerges, one far removed from the sanitized hero story repeated for generations. It's a story of decisions made in silence, actions taken with immense courage, and truths hidden under bureaucratic veils. And though her final moments remain partially beyond reach, what is now known reshapes everything that came before. The discovery of her aircraft does not reduce the wonder of her legacy. If anything, it intensifies it. It challenges every generation to ask, what would we do in her place? Would we fly forward into the unknown, aware of the danger, unwilling to compromise purpose for safety? Would we accept a mission cloaked in shadows because the possibility of progress, of truth, was worth the risk? If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the shocking twist in Amelia Earhart's final flight mystery? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.